A Bobcat E50 showing M-4515 isn't asking for attention. That's engine oil pressure shutdown. The machine already saved itself. The same little screen also throws codes meaning a button got stuck under a glove. Same alarm, different bill. So let's decode the real ones from the factory table. Cheapest fix first, worst case last. First, the thing nobody says out loud. A code isn't a diagnosis. It names which circuit stopped behaving. Finding the cause is still your job, and the cheapest cause is the one people skip. Second thing, and this one protects your wallet. Don't try to decode the letters or digits yourself. Code systems change between machine generations. Guessing the pattern is how a perfectly good part gets replaced. Look the exact code up, write every character down, plus what the machine was doing when it appeared. Now, cheapest tier. Near the top of that table sits C0309, battery voltage low. Mechanism. The controller watches its own supply. Sag that supply, and every circuit starts reporting nonsense. You've had a phone at 4% that insisted it was fine until you opened the camera. The machine does that too. Weak supply, confident display, and a fistful of codes that mean nothing. The actual fix is usually green fuzz on a terminal or a ground strap that's been finger-tight since spring. The table also lists CO314 battery voltage extremely low. Same story, further down the road. And CO322 battery voltage out of range low. These cluster. One real fault, several codes. Here's where it flips. The table lists CO319 battery voltage high, and that isn't the battery's fault. High voltage means the charging side is pushing too hard. The battery is the victim, not the suspect. It escalates. CO311 a battery voltage extremely high. That's the version that cooks electronics. And CO315 is battery voltage shutdown level, the point where the machine quits rather than damage itself. So before buying anything, clean both terminals, tighten the grounds, load test the battery, check the belt. Then clear the codes and run it. What comes back is real. What doesn't was noise. That single habit separates a 20-minute fix from a weekend of swapping parts blind. If that just changed how you'd read your own display, that's exactly what this channel is for. Stick around. Next year, still cheap. The table lists L0102, lights button error on. That means the panel saw a button held closed when it shouldn't be. Not the lights, the button. Same family, L02 high flow button error on. The panel reporting a switch that never let go. There's a low 3 too for the auxiliary button, and the information button has its own version too. Causes here are boring and cheap, dust packed under a membrane, a cracked seal, a leaning elbow. Work each button, clean the panel, cycle the key. Plenty of these clear and stay cleared. But some codes aren't the panel talking about itself. Some are the engine refusing to start. Cold morning won't fire, and the display hands you see to 'em are two glow plugs error on. There's a matching C20 free glow plugs error off. On and off versions of the same argument. Mechanism, the controller commands a circuit, then checks what happened. Command and feedback disagree, you get a code. Cheap end of that's a relay or a corroded connector. Expensive end is the plugs. Cranking has its own pair. C222 is starter error on. That's circuit reading commanded when it shouldn't. And C223 is starter error off. Opposite complaint, usually the same tired connection behind both. But here's where hard starting turns serious, because the fuel codes aren't about cranking at all. MythD07 is fuel hold, solenoid open circuit. Open circuit means a broken path, not a condemned part. Then M1402, fuel pull output error on. That pull solenoid is what physically moves fuel control. There's a matching error off, meaning the machine can't reliably tell the engine to keep running. And M1407, fuel pull output open circuit. Before anyone touches that solenoid, walk its harness. Wiring is cheaper than solenoids. Solenoids are cheaper than the diagnoses that skip to the wiring. Now the throttle. E0107 is throttle actuator open circuit. The controller's signal isn't arriving. E0105 is throttle actuator short to battery. Something found voltage it was never meant to touch. E0106 is the mirror image, short to ground. Both usually live at a chafe point, not inside the actuator. But the best code on this entire list is the one that costs absolutely nothing. E0123, throttle actuator not calibrated. That isn't a broken part, that's a procedure nobody ran. It shows up after battery or controller work. The manual lists the calibration steps. Do those first? People have bought a throttle actuator for that code. Don't be the next one. If your machine runs an angle blade, it has its own family. H2524, control switch out of neutral. The machine won't act until that switch reads center. A safety interlock doing exactly its job. H2521 is that switch out of range high. The signal drifted past what the controller accepts. Age 2522 is out of range low. Same drift, other direction. Connectors take the blame more than switches. The blade solenoid has matching codes. Tool 6 Stoffen is angle blade base solenoid open circuit. H2626 is that solenoid overcurrent. Respect to that one. Something is pulling more than it should. The table also lists C235, offset base solenoid short to battery. Same shape, different circuit. But one code makes every other code on that screen unreliable. L7404, gateway controller, no communication. The modules have stopped talking to each other. When that's active, the rest of the list may be modules guessing about parts they can't see. Fix the communication fault first, clear everything, reread. Half that list usually doesn't come back. Often it's a connector with a green pin, or a harness rubbed through where nobody looks. That was the cheap half. Now the half where the invoice changes shape. MO613 is engine speed, no signal. The controller has lost its read on engine rotation. G-bend, a sensor, face packed with debris. Wrong gap, damaged wire. Check that first. MO618 is engine speed out of range. A reading that exists but doesn't make physical sense. MO610 is engine speed high. That's a real complaint, not a sensor having a bad day. MO611 is engine speed extremely high. You shut it down. You don't investigate at throttle. EVE 0615 is engine speed shutdown, the point the machine stops the engine to protect it. Which brings us to the worst case, and the code we opened with. MO414 is engine oil pressure extremely low. That isn't a code you drive home on. The cheapest possible cause is a sender or its wire line to the controller. It happens. The worst case is real pressure loss, and every extra minute running is buying bearing damage. MO415 is engine oil pressure shutdown. The machine already decided, and it decided correctly. One rule here: confirm real pressure with a mechanical gauge before anyone condemns that engine. Now the part with no codes at all. Weak hydraulics, slow slew, soft travel, screen stays quiet. The manual's troubleshooting table lists causes instead: loose fittings, broken hoses, reduced engine RPM near the top, deeper in load sense, relief set too low, joystick internal leakage, cylinder leakage, travel motor wear. And if the safety locks won't release, that table points at low hydraulic pressure, not a bad lock. Before any pressure test, warm the oil to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold oil hands you a false answer. So check terminals, rounds, connectors, and calibration before parts. Escalate only when the machine says shut down. That's the ranking. The cheap codes talk about supply and switches. The expensive ones talk about pressure and speed. Subscribe if you'd rather look a code up than guess at one. Next, we walk the E50 pressure test, port by port. The exact specs are in the service manual linked below. Like this, if it saved you a guess.